So you're from what school?
I'm from Texas A&M.
That's right, Texas A&M. Yeah. And you are, how long have you been in SSA?
So I founded my organization last August, so we're coming up on about a year.
First SSA organization at A&M?
Not the first. There used to be one, but they died about 4 years ago. So I virtually created it.
You have
from scratch.
Resurrected it.
Yes, I had to resurrect the. It was in the graveyard. It was.
Yeah.
I resurrected it from the grave. Absolutely.
So it's very new, like just a year old or something?
Yeah, just about a year old, yeah.
So had you been to any SSA conference before?
No, not at all.
Your first conference? Mine too.
Yeah, my first conference. Yeah.
And were you, did you have any kind of religious background before you were in school? Or?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I was kind of like on again, off again with church. My parents weren't really super consistent. And then right about 5th grade was when my parents said, all right, we need to get serious with this whole religion thing. So we found a local church and kind of hopped around a little bit. We virtually landed on a Methodist church. Yeah. And that's where I spent the majority of my middle and high school years. I was actually fairly involved in the church. I played in the youth band. Yeah. For about 6 years. Yeah. I consistently went on yearly mission trips all throughout middle school and high school. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, I just feel like at the end of the day, they kind of put me in it too late because I never really felt that kind of connected sense that everybody around me had. I could definitely tell that there was something just a little bit off in the way that I viewed everything compared to the other kids around me. And I think that's actually kind of what led me on the path towards becoming non-religious, because I had gone to my mentor in the church who had kind of gone through the confirmation process with me in the Methodist church. And I asked him, am I doing this wrong, essentially? Because all these people around me, they're having these experiences, they're describing these things. And, it wasn't as though the church was promoting this idea that you have to have these like amazing religious experiences to be a real Christian or anything. But I still felt like I'm not even remotely having these experiences. So what can I do? So he essentially said, all right, let's work out a plan. I'm going to give you a few books. I'm going to give you a few talks. Mm-hmm. And I want you to look into it. I want you to read, and we can have monthly discussion meetings. So I always kind of find it ironic because the path that led me towards becoming non-religious was started from wanting to better myself as a Christian, right? To become a better Christian, to kind of understand why I wasn't.
Why didn't you feel the spiritual power of God like other people did, or
that's
what?
a great question. I mean,
that's what you were asking yourself.
Yeah,
right?
that's what. That's exactly the question that kind of started the entire process. Yeah. And obviously in YouTube videos, you have related videos on the sidebar, and a lot of these religious debates were with Christian and an atheist, Christian and a rabbi, Christian and an imam, or something like this. And I eventually just started only watching the Christian and atheist ones, or imam atheist, rabbi atheist. And slowly over time, and again, mind you, this was maybe a 1.5 to 2 year process, very kind of amorphous process of me becoming non-religious, and I just eventually started realizing that I was becoming much more sympathetic to the atheist arguments and not really finding much foundation in the religious side of it. And, I started realizing, like, hey, maybe the reason that I'm not connecting with this is because it's not something I'm going to connect with. Maybe I need to reevaluate my intention in this. Is my intention to discover the truth that seems to be connecting with me more and more? Is my intention simply to bolster my Christian faith? And I kind of just had to admit to myself, this is a search for religious truth, not a search for Christianity. And I will admit, I'm still not done with that journey. I'm not completely solidified. I'm fairly strong. I have, I'm trying to think of the word. I have conviction in my beliefs. But I don't think I'll ever get a point in my life where I say, no, I'm done searching. The search is over. I've got all the information I need. I hope I don't get to that point. Right. Once I get to that point, my curiosity is gone. My skepticism is gone. Skepticism even of my own beliefs as an atheist is gone.
There's a famous line from Arcesilaus. He's a Greek philosopher. He says, "Nothing is certain, not even that."
Right.
So, did you feel like was there any kind of moral appeal? You know, that you hear this a lot, that Christians will say, well, the reason people turn to atheism is because they just want to do whatever they want.
Right.
So did you feel like in your own journey that you were like, gee, I just want, there's so many things I want to do that are immoral,
right,
that my religion doesn't want me to, and so I kind of want that so badly that's influencing. Did it ever feel like that was influencing your process, or were you really just trying to hang on to a faith more than anything?
I really feel like it was more like I was trying to hang on to the faith. I mean, I noticed that it was something that my parents obviously found important. The people who I were around thought it was important. My friends thought it was important. I felt like it was something that was just a part of life. Yeah. Because it's something you grow into. And even though, I got into it at a relatively late age, I could still understand that, these people around me are finding this important. Maybe I need to do so myself. And I don't feel like I've ever necessarily been sympathetic to that argument of you just want to leave the faith to do. So you could go do a bunch of immoral things. Yeah. Did you feel like after you sort of really came to a more confident position that you just really didn't believe this stuff anymore, did you feel like you then just started experimenting with a bunch of stuff that you hadn't done before that was not? No, not at all. Not at that age.
It didn't morally change much of what you were doing.
Not really much. So I think the main reason that I don't understand that argument, especially because all the people who are around at that age who self-identified as Christian, and they're kids, so it's not fair. They're not adults per se, but there was no difference in the behavior of them versus
Yeah, they were doing all the same things.
They were doing all the same things. The religion seemed to have absolutely zero impact on their actual behavior. It's just at the end of the day, I, as an atheist, had myself to be accountable to. Yeah. And they got to pray. Yeah. It seemed too cheap. You mean too easy? They could maybe not too easy, but it's just a different. It's just a different mindset. It's just a different mindset. Yeah. Did you, once you got into college, did you then feel like in terms of your moral trajectory, are you? I have not asked anybody this question, to be honest. Right. So I'm asking you now. I don't know why, but it's just coming into my head. Yeah. But I think because I hear Christians say this a lot. Right. So I'm trying to test what your experience has been like on this. So have you felt like in college you're basically living the same moral life you kind of expected you would have been living when you were 16? Right. Or are there a lot more things you do now that probably you would have thought I probably wouldn't be living like this? There are very few things that I feel I wouldn't do now if I were religious. Yeah. And the thing is, it still goes back to that idea of me as a kid looking at all the people around me and thinking, wow, these people aren't acting any differently as those who have any other belief system. I still think the same thing in college because I know plenty of Christians who, they smoke, they sleep around, they cheat at school, right? And that's not to say that Christians are supposed to be perfect people, but at the end of the day, it's still that idea that it doesn't seem, the religion doesn't inherently seem to generate these kinds of behaviors that you would associate with the moral religious life, the moral Christian life. I feel like there's very few things that I do now. So there must be, I assume there's some people who are, that are Christians that are a little bit more serious. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Then wouldn't probably. Yeah. And the people, and to be fair, I don't take the Christians who act in those ways as good representatives of their faith. Sure. Just because I know so many good representatives of the Christian faith, I can recognize that they're not. Yeah. And I try to call out atheists because I hear a lot of atheists who say like, oh, look at these Christians who are doing this, who are doing that, who say this, who say that. It's fair if it's systemic or if it's built into the religion, but a lot of times people are trying to hold these, lower level thing. I don't want to say lower level thinking Christians, but just not very foundationally strong Christians as representatives of the faith. And I know Christians who are equally mad at those kinds of Christians, you know, so-called lukewarm Christians, they often say. They're even more angry at those than us atheists are, because they know that their reputation is on the line when these people go out and self-proclaim themselves as Christian. So I am sympathetic to religious people who kind of have to deal with that.
It's, you know, because we are all so easily put into groups, that anytime you see anybody who's sort of a representative in some way of your group on TV saying something utterly stupid, everybody shakes their head and just thinks, oh, you know, why am I identified, you know, in this group? So is the, for moral stuff now, when you're making moral decisions, what's your process now for how do you view the big picture? And I don't really mean like a moral decision, like, gee, how much beer should I drink or whatever. This is, you know, I mean more like, how do I view morality generally? And you I'm sure you're familiar with the arguments about the sort of moral argument for God and things like that. So I'm just curious what sort of your take is on morality in general. Do you view it as all relative, or is it, you think there really are things that are just right and they're always right? And
I would consider myself a moral skeptic or an amoralist, but I think that's really like a purely intellectual approach to morality. I think that
like you, just to be clear, what you mean by that is you don't. When you say amoral, I assume you do make moral decisions.
I don't think that there are moral qualities to actions.
Right. So you don't think morality is like a real thing that's...
No, I think it's simply both a societally and even evolutionarily driven mindset in order to kind of help pretty much aid in the evolution of human society. It's just a very easy... It's a very good way to reinforce or enforce negative or positive behavior within a society.
So a moral action, what is often thought of as a moral action, you would say is more like a balloon floating up. It just does it.
Right.
It's not a good thing. It's not better than a branch falling down off a tree.
Not per se,
Okay.
But and I kind of have this conception that I've kind of formed over this last year. I call it my functional and non-functional worldview. And my non-functional worldview is where I would place something like my amoralistic beliefs, right? Because I understand that even though on an intellectual level I can say there are no moral qualities to actions, I can't actually live like that, right? Like I'm not a...
It doesn't seem like it's possible.
I'm not a sociopath. If I was a sociopath, I may very well be able to live like that. But
even they have things that are right.
Right. Well, yeah, and
to them.
And I understand that no matter how hard I try to think that morality doesn't exist, I can't get away from my own, I would consider evolutionarily kind of created instincts,
moral instincts.
Yeah, and I do think the heart of human morality is simply empathy. Yeah, and I do think empathy is derived from evolutionary mechanisms, and so it's not like I have to try. So
functionally, it's pretty easy just to say, look, we're just made this way by virtue of nature.
Right. Yeah, I don't have to try to think morally and to think of actions in a moral context, because that's so baked into the human condition. I couldn't get away from it if I wanted to.
Right. I actually think that's really honest of you, because I hear sometimes I try to tell people I'm interviewing, it doesn't seem to me like it's even possible to live amorally.
And that's also why I don't consider myself like a humanist. Yeah, because it's just another, I consider, unfounded kind of belief. I mean, sure, you can try to root it in something. I've seen attempts, but at the end of the day, it's just as subjective as any other claim to me.